And General Cavoli, thank you for your years of service as you kind of approach the end of a fantastic career that you've had. So thank you, sir, for everything. So when I was Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel Readiness, I had a meeting with one of my counterparts from Latvia who was really concerned about how they could build up their reserves.
Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Andrew, a proud progressive, a patriot who believes in defending democracy at home and abroad, but also believes in holding power accountable and demanding transparency in our foreign policy. Today, we're reacting to a recent hearing, featured on where Congressman Gil Cisneros asked some tough and necessary questions about how the U.S. is preparing for the possibility of future Russian aggression toward the Baltic states. That's Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. These are NATO allies, frontline democracies, and frankly, they're in a very real danger zone. Let's watch the video.
Sir, gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Cisneros.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to give my prayers and sympathies to the families of the service members who lost their lives. And General Cavoli, thank you for your years of service as you kind of approach the end of a fantastic career that you've had. So thank you, sir, for everything. So when I was Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel Readiness, I had a meeting with one of my counterparts from Latvia who was really concerned about how they could build up their reserves. I mean, to the point they were worried about the Russians and the possibility of them coming there, that they were actually drilling elementary school children, preparing military drill, ensuring that they're learning that in elementary school to get them ready as they matured and got older. Obviously, I think all the Baltic states, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, they're all very concerned about the Russians, and the invasion into Ukraine probably did not ease their tensions. But how are we preparing our Baltic allies, getting them ready for the possible threat of a Russian invasion? And really, and maybe this might be more for for the classified briefing, but what is the possible threat of later on if the Russians are successful in Ukraine, that they will continue their aggression on other former Soviet states?
Thank you, sir. So we help them in a variety of ways. First, how does NATO help them? NATO's new defense plans give a structure for them to plan and to nest their national defense plans inside. So those plans go together with the NATO plans, and this really helps a defense planner clarify a whole bunch of things about how much of what he needs where, et cetera, et cetera. Second, the command structures that have been outlined and the relationships that have been outlined as a result of the plans or inside the plans gives them permanent relationships for units to build readiness with and headquarters to build procedures with. So that's one big advantage that helps them a great deal. Bilaterally, we work very closely with those allies because they're so intent on buying American stuff. So it's one thing to buy a HIMARS. It's another thing to know how to use it. That's pretty simple. But it's another thing entirely to know how to integrate that capability into your warfighting methodology. And so, for example, I've got a battery of HIMARS, American HIMARS, in Estonia that's been working for well over a year and a half with them on how exactly they're going to incorporate their long-range fires into their operational methodology after this. I just was on the phone with I just received a letter from the Chief of Defense of Lithuania, who's interested in having a similar program, some sort of a HIMARS academy. I could go on and on. On a third level, we also do special security assistance initiatives. So there's the Baltic Air and Missile Defense Initiative. There's the Baltic State Security Initiative. And those are focused appropriations for us to be able to help them buy the American stuff that matters to us. Focused on air and missile defense and domain awareness in the air right now, of course, because that's the most important thing. I guess I could go for hours. There's some classified things we do as well, Congressman.
All right. Ms. Thompson, can we still be confident that we're going to keep troops in Europe there and keep supporting NATO, that the United States will step up if, in fact, Russia does invade the Baltic states?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. On the first piece, I would just emphasize again, we're in the midst of a global posture review, so certainly we're taking these priorities and these considerations into our analysis as we conduct that. And then I would also emphasize the Secretary was very clear that we remain committed to NATO, and that includes all facets of the treaty. And so I would say yes. And I would also just add perhaps a bit of color to what General Cavoli was talking about specifically with the Baltics, and just emphasize that we have been so appreciative in this administration so far of how our Baltic friends acutely understand the threat perception, and we hope that, and we have encouraged our Baltic friends to communicate that threat perception to the Western and Central European powers, as well as we try to encourage the alliance as a whole to focus on defense spending.
All right, and then I got 30 seconds, but so very quickly, General Cavoli, you and your counterparts in NOPACOM, AFRICOM are always, I don't want to say at odds, but always fighting for assets to kind of come into your areas of your command and areas of operation there, responsibility. How are we kind of working through that to get to this point there to kind of ensure that we're not asking for too much, but you're getting what you need?
Sure. So our job is to articulate our requirements based on the task we're given, sir, and the Secretary of Defense, with the advice of the chairman, allocates the resources. There's another step, though, right? Eric Carrilla and I have known each other our whole lives. We can communicate. There are things that I can do to help alleviate some of his challenges, and vice versa. Mike Langley's headquarters is right next door to my headquarters in Stuttgart. We talk back and forth. And
Gentleman's time's expired.
First off, Cisneros shared a chilling anecdote. When he was Under Secretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, a Latvian official told him they were so concerned about a Russian invasion that they were training elementary school kids in military drills. Let that sink in. We're talking about school children being prepared for war because their country is on edge, watching what's happening in Ukraine and wondering if they're next. That's not fear-mongering, that's reality. As a progressive, that really hits me in two ways. One, it shows just how existential the threat of authoritarianism still is in the world. Two, it reminds us that militarism isn't just about weapons. It shapes societies, it trickles down to children. So yes, we need to be there for our allies. But we also need to ask, how do we defend democracy without becoming slaves to perpetual war? Now, General Cavoli explained that NATO has new defense plans, a blueprint that allows smaller countries like Latvia or Estonia to align their national defense with NATO's bigger picture. That sounds solid. Let's be real. NATO has its flaws, but when it works, it provides a collective defense shield against imperialist aggression like what we're seeing from Putin's Russia. But here's my question. Are we making the shield strong by investing in diplomacy, development, and resilience? Or are we just funneling billions into weapons systems without addressing the deeper issues? This part got me thinking. The U.S. is heavily involved in bilateral training programs, like deploying HIMARS rocket systems to Estonia and possibly building a HIMARS academy in Lithuania. Look, I'm not naive. Precision weapons do make a difference on the battlefield. But I can't help but ask, how much of this is genuine support, and how much is just a gift to the military-industrial complex? We always need to be vigilant about whether our foreign policy is being dictated by defense contractors. If Raytheon or Lockheed Martin are cheering louder than our allies, something's wrong. We don't defend democracy by selling it out to corporate profit. General Cavoli mentioned there are also classified measures being taken to support Baltic defense. Okay, fine, we can't have everything on the evening news. But I'll say this as a patriot who believes in civilian oversight of the military. Classified doesn't mean unaccountable. Congress and the public deserve to know that these actions are in line with our values, not just our strategic interests. Let's defend freedom, not just expand influence. Officials affirm that the U.S. is still 100% committed to NATO. That's good to hear, especially when we've got far-right voices in this country who'd happily throw our allies under the bus to appease Putin. Progressives, don't let them co-opt the word patriot. Supporting international alliances, democratic norms, and collective defense. Those are patriotic too. That's what real security looks like. Shared defense, not lone cowboy adventurism. And let's be honest, supporting NATO also means we have to push for reform within NATO, especially to make sure it's not just a tool for Western dominance, but a real alliance of shared democratic values. Cisneros asked a practical question. How do different commands make sure they're not stepping on each other's toes while asking for military assets? General Cavoli's response was actually reassuring. Open communication, coordination between commands, and clear prioritization. This is the kind of bureaucratic honesty we rarely see. And honestly, this is where progressive oversight can make a difference. We need transparency not just in war planning, but in resource use, military budgeting, and interagency coordination. So what's the takeaway here?